Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. Welcome those that are already jumping on to listen to Miss Candace's story. The Her Version podcast is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I have Miss Candace Sheppard on here with us to share her story on how she was able to slowly grow her voice and her confidence. She no longer apologizes for her power. She is the founder of Confidence That Converts and is here to help you destroy limiting beliefs that are hindering your future so you can create a powerful one. Welcome, lady.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here sharing with everyone.
Yes, girl. Well, listen, I was just on your podcast yesterday.
Yes.
So, not trying to like low key compete, but but we're building empires over here.
Yes,
So
indeed
I
we
so
are.
appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit down with me and share your journey and your story and nuggets of inspiration that you can share with the Her Version community over here.
Mhm.
How's your Wednesday treating you?
It's treating me real smooth and real fine. Like I said, the dog is not trying to tear everything down, and neither is the child. So
I love
it's a win over here.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, listen, I would love to just kind of jump in. I would love to hear a little bit about your past, a little bit about your journey. The Her Version podcast is all about storytelling. So I would love to just kind of give you the floor and kind of give us some bullet points on who you are, a little bit about your past, and then we'll kind of flow in. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And so with respect to my background, right? Let's just the best way I can describe it is like a loving family in the middle of Beirut. Okay, right? Like that's the kind of chaos that I come from. And so the environment that I came up in very specific instances, was where I was hit with a lot of venom and a lot of wisdom all at the same time.
Oh,
And so, yeah, I grew up the oldest of three kids. Power to all the oldest children who know they went through the struggle the most.
same.
And so I also grew up in a household that was filled with men. I was the only girl out of about 18 grandchildren. And so, yeah, we grew
Oh
up.
my gosh.
Yes, yes, a lot of testosterone at all times, in all ways, places, and spaces. And so, what was interesting was that, again, the environment that I came up in was filled with so much duality. It was very difficult to uncover who I was, right, and who I wanted to be in the world. Eventually, I made my way. But what was interesting was all these men, in so many ways, wanted to physically protect me, but did not know how to do that emotionally, right? And so, as I came up, I was a very quiet child. We are some loud, crazy personalities in my family. And people can see where I get all that boisterousness from now. It took years to get there, but my mom used to always tell me I was not the type of child who was one to talk until I was about 5 years old. And apparently, I'm making up for all the talking I didn't do since then, right? Right, since birth.
I love it.
So, right, it was the kind of household where, a lot of ambition and drive was welcome, but not emotion. And so I grew up without realizing that in so many ways I had numbed myself And my way of getting by was all about doing the right thing at the right time in the right order. That was the way I derived my value. And the value also came from not pushing back on everyone else and what they told me they wanted to do. So, and I also didn't grow up in a very religious household. Okay, we were sinners. Okay, there was drugs, there was alcohol, there was all the things. Men always coming into the house. A lot of, again, love mixed with instability. And so I took that with me through to my high school years. And it was right around that time that I started to question everything. I was like, I'm working like a dog. No one in this family is happy. I'm doing what it is that they told me to do. And as I started to come more into my own and push back on some of these boundaries, I realized that my value wasn't found in the things I was doing. It was also not found in the way they perceived me, because the moment I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do, I wasn't valuable anymore. And so I got to the point where I was like, to hell with all of this and to hell with all of y'all. And I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do now. And so from about 17 years old to 19, I just went on this crazed path of, again, do what I want to do, not going to school anymore, not going to be the straight A student, not going to take what everyone else is that, whatever it is they want me to do. I'm not going to take anyone's crap. And what happened was I ended up in a relationship with a boyfriend who very much reflected that chaotic environment. 1 minute there, the next minute not, or physically present, emotionally not. And that was a roller coaster that I recommend no one get on at any amusement park. Okay.
Thank you.
But what was interesting was by the time we had finished, trying to tear each other's lives apart from not getting what we needed, and again, coming together from the chaos that was modeled in our own homes, I was devastated. At that point, I had been kicked out of my mother's home after getting into a physical fight with her, much of which came from the sibling rivalry that she fostered between me and my brothers. Those of us who are the girls who grew up in Caribbean, Latino, Black households, if you know, it is very much an environment where a man is celebrated even in his mediocrity.
Yes.
And the woman has to do everything. She's got to be everything. She's got to have everything. And so the one particular fight I had gotten into with my brother was very much the black sheep of the family, like my mom was. So she was much more partial to him. Long story short, this particular fight I had with him, even though I was innocent, this is the kind of craziness that put me in the position of questioning why I was listening and doing what everyone wanted me to do all the time. Okay. Because I would do right and I would still be blamed for things I hadn't done wrong.
Wow.
Right. So as I'm, coming up and trying to qualify my identity, this particular fight ensued, and over ice cream. For those of you who are foodies and understand the importance of food, okay, you are willing to go to war over the things you want to eat and the ice cream and foods you buy for yourself. And so this day was no different. What I didn't anticipate was it would be the thing that my mom kicked me out over the house over, which is what spurred that fight, that physical fight I had with her. And so long story short, that physical fight was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, I am never staying in my mother's house again. If you are visionary like myself, you tend to have a lot of conflict with your parents because your parents tend to bring you up believing that the best way to go is theirs. They don't understand their positioning in your life as a guide, as someone to walk you through your decision making and help you uncover more of your own image and identity. And so this is what ensued with my mom. The ice cream went flying. I got kicked out, and I was on my own with this boyfriend. Now I had moved up to him, moved up to Boston with him rather, randomly. And while we were there, we had gotten into a horrible fight. And I left there, and now here I was, 19 years old, not knowing who I was, what I wanted, not having the family and the support it was that I needed. No mom or dad to talk to. Dad was a Rolling Stone. Okay, wherever he laid his hat was his home, right?
Okay.
So he wasn't around either. And that was the point in life where I was like, I need to get acquainted with my image and my identity, with what I want for life.
Wow, you were
And
thinking that at 19?
yeah, I know.
Good for
I was an
you.
enigma. I was
Oh
very
my
much a
gosh.
strange bird. Yes, I've always been a thinker. I've always been, but that's the mark of a visionary, right? We are deeply attached to growth. We love contribution. We want to see things move forward. And that was that part of me was in such conflict with what my family was modeling.
Yeah.
Right. And so while it wasn't religion for them, the religion was do as I say, not as we do. And
Wow.
because I wouldn't ascribe to that, I became the black sheep. And then I realized black sheep are typically the ones who recognize what's happening, are there, in my belief, are there the type of people that God placed there with the purpose of disrupting things to create the healthy change the family needs. Girl,
I'll
you get
take that.
exactly where I'm coming from.
I'll
Okay.
take it.
Yes, yes. And it's because we see things clearly, right? We're recognizing that there's no connection here. There's no purpose for us to be moving forward like this. And so we end up becoming the black sheep if we aren't born the black sheep to begin with. And so I had started to embrace this as my identity. I took on a job, interestingly enough, when I broke up with this boyfriend. I took on a job that was waiting for me before I moved to Boston. And so I came back and I'm devastated. I moved in with my grandmother and right back into just another layer of chaos, right? Moved back in with her and then took this job. And while I was on this job, I met a friend who began to introduce me to personal development. Her name was Janice, and I credit her with being one of the people in this world that actually saved my life. And so she began to talk to me about relationships and even her relationship with God. And it didn't sound like any of this foolishness that I had been listening to from some religious zealots I had come across. I was like, you are crazy and you are talking about stuff and that is not God. I knew what God was and what he wasn't. And so the more she began to talk to me, the more I began to recognize that I did have a purpose, and it was to disrupt and it was to do all of these things. And so fast forward about a year and a half later, I had decided that I wanted to be a Christian, not by these standard terms, not with this religious rhetoric of you have to do this and that. I was purely after relationship. And the more I began to understand God's order and the way he moved things, the more I began to understand the purpose for all of the chaos that I had been going through. Interestingly enough, the chaos was not finished. It was not done with me because I hadn't unlearned these crazy patterns from family, right? And that duality, 1 minute venom, 1 minute wisdom. Sure enough, I meet my husband. And I'm thinking, this is Prince Charming, baby. He has come to save the day. You know, the rhetoric that we get like pushed on with the patriarchy and all the craziness. And so he represented so much of what I lacked. He was the 20% that I was missing out of the 80. Wow. And I did not recognize that my husband had a knack for presenting a particular image. So I didn't have the tools to discern who was real and who wasn't, because I was getting the back and forth in my family. And lo and behold, we got married about a year after dating and, unexpectedly had a little munchkin, right? And so in that whole process, when you're going through the transitions of life, the parts of your identity that don't belong to you start to fall off. You start recognizing this is out of sync with my values. This is not what I wanted, right?
Wow.
And as I started to unpack all of these things, my husband began to grow in his resentment because he didn't want to grow. He didn't want to do those things. And I ended up finding out that he had a great deal in common with my mother, who is a covert narcissist. And so over time, I began to unpack, again, all the things I had used to qualify my image, all the things I had used to qualify my identity. And the more I began to separate the chaos of what others wanted to project on me and get that diamond sharp clarity on what I wanted and who I was and who I believed God made me to be, the happier I became.
Yes.
But the more conflict it created in my marriage.
Yeah.
So now I've got a choice. Am I going to continue to keep on with this chaos or not? Anytime I wanted to start a business, he had something negative to do or say. Anytime I wanted to expand, it was chaos coming from him, or even the friends, and I use that term loosely, right? The
Yeah.
friends I had allowed in my life. And what was beautiful about it, if we were to wrap all of this up, was that I walked away with a thorough understanding of, again, who I was, what I wanted, the type of environment I wanted to be in. And I separated from my husband, finally, after years, restarted my life, launched Confidence That Converts, which I had been working on prior to the separation. And all of these things put everything in life into such a wash and rinse cycle that everything that came out of it was clean. And I was
Wow.
like, this I can wear. This is a part of my image. This is a part of my identity. And as I went through that growth period, there was health issues, hospital visits, all types of manipulation, neglect, emotional abuse. And the more it happened, the more I began to learn more about who I was and what I wanted and what I was not going to tolerate. Yesterday, you and I talked about briefly what happens in someone's mind when they want to leave. People are quick to say, well, why didn't you leave?
Yeah.
In my case, it was that I was not aware that that was abuse.
Yeah.
I was so used to it.
Yeah.
And it took someone to say that, to go, that kind of clarity was instantly the thing I needed to hear, to go, oh, that's what this is.
Yeah.
I was so used to it at home, I had no idea this is what was going on. This was the norm,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so once I recognized that, I was able to do something about it. And that's when I began to tap back into my power. That power comes from three things I'm always talking about: sharp clarity, diamond sharp clarity. It comes from congruence, right? Are these people a part of the experience I want to create from my life? Do they reflect these things or not? Right? Am I living out the values that make me feel the most like me? Right? And that clarity and congruence is what gives you the courage you were talking about, right? The courage to take action you normally wouldn't take. That is what spurred me on to leave my husband,
Wow.
to turn everything around, to start healing my body. And it turns out that each one of those experiences, while I do not believe God wants us to go through hardship to learn, it was one of the things he brought good out of, right? That's the empowering part of our story too. Like, our strengths are built as we go through different aspects of our stories. It sharpens our skills with people. And that is what catapults you into a place of confidence where you can say, oh, this is a hell no. And that is a hell yes, because it's all me.
Yeah.
And so the even more interesting part of the story is that after that period, it was about 5 or 6 years after all of this happened, that my husband watched my transformation and it woke him up. And I had shared this with you prior, but of course, everyone listening hasn't heard it yet. My husband's counselor, he went to therapy over it. And I had been asking him for years prior to do that.
Yeah.
And so it took me separating him and asking him to leave our home, all of these things. And I was like, bro, I don't want to hear a thing you have to say anymore. Your story, you need to get better at writing it, sir. Okay. And sure enough, his counselor calls me and she's like, I've been working with him for months. And I'm like this, like, okay, sis, just, continue telling the lies. If he wants to tell you a Hail Mary, let him do that. But I'm not believing it until I see some things walked out. So that first time she invited me into a session with him and I said, oh no. See, it's so powerful to be in a place of saying hell yes or hell no,
Yeah.
right? If your no doesn't mean anything, your yes won't either.
Yeah.
So getting there was the thing that she was like, oh, she is serious about not making room for not making any room or space for this man in her life anymore. She was so persistent. She called me again. She said, I've got some things, some stories I want to share with you. And I want you to come into a session to listen to what your husband has learned and what he has to say. And that was the thing
Wow.
that I went into the session, okay, with, the skeptic's brow. Okay, sir, let's
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
And sure enough, she was telling the unmitigated truth. And he began to unpack all of the trauma and the
Wow.
chaos in his life. And so that mirroring, again, all the experiences I went through with him, losing my health over losing myself, right?
Yeah.
All the things that had happened, childhood till present day, became the powerful parts of my story because they propelled me even deeper into the work that I do now as a coach and a business owner. And so that is what manifested into confidence that converts, where I am so enamored with people and their possibilities and their highest capability that my work revolves around that brilliant bond they have between their strengths and their skills and their story. And they're not chasing the strengths and the skills as I used to do when I was first building my business and leaving themselves out of it,
Yeah.
which is why when I came across Miss Sabrina Victoria, I was like, oh, ma'am, you understand the power of story. Let's have a conversation.
Yes. Yes.
There's so much that we miss in it. And a lot of us don't have the confidence we need to take the actions we want to courageously because we're still apologizing for our
Yeah.
story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A lot of what you're saying, goes back to, I understand now. I understand now looking back, I learned lessons now.
Hmm.
How far away from our struggles do you think you have to be in order to actually understand the lessons that our struggles taught us? Do you think we can learn them while we're in the middle of them, or do you think there has to be some distance?
It depends on the person. And I'll say this much, it depends on the person, particularly because it's all about their self awareness.
Yeah.
Right? I tell my students this, that there's all of these A's you have to hit in the process of trying to get to transformation, right? Awareness makes you clear that something is stirred up, but it's different when you're practicing acknowledgement. That's also very different from when you're practicing acceptance, and then there's actual application to create that type of change. So you can have an event that happens to you that there's a lot of distance between then and now, and still not be in a place of awareness or acceptance or acknowledgement or any of that. So again, in my understanding throughout my experiences, all the things that I've done with coaching, it absolutely depends on where that person is in the dig.
Yeah.
I tell my students this just the same, that closure requires a reckoning, right? And by reckoning, you have to recognize not just what happened to you, but how in so many ways you participated in it so that you catch the patterns. And now, as new situations come up that mimic what happened, you can interrupt the pattern and make a different choice to create a different outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.